Since the midterm elections, Republicans have revived their crusade to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Now conservative groups are pressing Mitch McConnell to repeal the law with a budget move that would only require 51 votes, avoiding a Democratic filibuster. President Obama would immediately veto a repeal, but Republicans still want to do it. And that's not all. Senator Marco Rubio and Congressman Paul Ryan are reportedly putting together the GOP alternative to the health care law. That's right, Paul Ryan, who wanted to take an axe to the safety net, has his eye on health care. What could go wrong? But here's the thing Republicans find so easy to ignore. The law is helping millions of people, real, hardworking Americans who otherwise wouldn't have gone without care. Last night, I spoke to one of those people. David Tedrow's insurance company ended his plan while he was struggling with liver disease. He says Obamacare saved his life, and he can't stand to see lawmakers using the law for political gain.
Well, it really saddens me because obviously, you know, what's happened to the moral compass in this country? You know, we need to be concerned about people and their lives. And that's not happening. It doesn't seem to be important.
We need to be concerned about all the Davids across the country and forget about new gimmicky ways to repeal a law that's working. Joining me now is Jason Johnson and Michelle Cottle. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, glad to be here, Rev.
Michelle, do Republicans have any answer for people like David Tedrow about what happens if they repeal Obamacare?
Well, look, what they talk about is the same thing they've been talking about. They like to call Obamacare a job killer. They like to talk about the people whose policies were canceled because they didn't meet the standards of Obamacare. They are really concerned about the successes of Obamacare because the more people get signed up, the more successful it is, the harder it is to repeal. So, you know, your interview on the show last night is exactly the kind of thing that makes them very nervous and makes them push even harder to repeal.
You know, Jason, I want to play another part of the interview that I did last night with David Tedrow. He'd written a column in the Washington Post about his experience, and I asked him about the comments it received. Listen to this.
A lot of them have been very positive. A lot of them have really, really frightened me. Again, it's back to, you know, where is the moral compass of this country? People have actually said I should have died.
Wow.
That you know, the money that went to save me should have been better spent, or it should have reduced their taxes. And I'm just shocked by that.
Jason, what do you make of this ugliness?
It doesn't surprise me. There is a segment in this country that hates anything remotely associated with Barack Obama. The man could cure cancer, clean the oceans, and take care of your kids before dinner every night, and people would still say he was an evil Muslim communist dead set on destroying the country. But I think there's a key issue here, Rev, and you know this as somebody who's out there in the streets talking to people every day. This is a problem. And the Republicans didn't have a plan. They had the Bush administration to come up with a plan. They had the Reagan administration to come up with a plan. Obama has actually tried to do something to fix our health care crisis, and the Republicans have never really had an alternative plan, but they want to attack his.
You know, Michelle, the New York Times reported this week that business leaders are pretty happy with Republicans, but they don't want them to change the health care law. Quote, for one thing, many of the insurance exchanges are finally working well, and businesses have adapted to the new landscape. Even more important, added demand from the newly insured is likely to increase profits in sectors like hospitals, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices. One banker even added, anything regarding the Affordable Care Act is going to be a stretch. Are Republicans really going to do something that big business doesn't want, Michelle?
Look, the Republicans have to make a good show of this. A lot of them were elected by motivating the base with promises of repeal. But, you know, I've talked to some Republican lobbyists recently, and they call this a show vote. They'll get up there, they'll vote to repeal, or they'll, you know, work whatever kind of games they want to do. And then it'll come down to very targeted efforts to do things like reform the medical device tax or kind of rifle shot, very narrow issues. It's not going to be a case of getting rid of it wholesale. It's just not going to happen.
But isn't that possibly, Jason, going to backfire? I mean, a new estimate from the Department of Health and Human Services suggests between 9 to 9.9 million people will sign up on these exchanges by the end of this year. What do Republicans say to those 9 million people if they lose their health care?
They're going to say, too late, you already voted for us. Because that's basically what they're gambling on here. They want to do this big show vote, as you said, and make President Obama veto it. But I think privately and even publicly, a lot of Republicans out there in Ohio, in Kentucky, they don't want to see the Affordable Care Act repealed. They don't want the Supreme Court to gut it next year because they recognize that people, even though they don't necessarily like the name, people are enjoying the expanded Medicare. They're enjoying the fact that pre-existing conditions aren't keeping them off, and this would be chaos, absolute chaos financially and on a human rights level if this bill were to be repealed.
You know, this quote is really making the rounds, Michelle, today. Senator Ted Cruz said net neutrality, a policy he doesn't like, is Obamacare for the internet. And Cruz isn't the only one to use this phrase. Mitch McConnell once called Dodd-Frank Obamacare for banks. And Congressman Jack Kingston said Common Core standards are Obamacare for education. So Obamacare has just become shorthand for anything they don't like.
Well, it's, I guess, a switch from Katrina. Are all of these things going to be Obamacare? Now everything is Obamacare for X. You know, this is the way the base gets riled up. Obamacare has become something completely political, and the way to get people's hit their gut level reaction is to call something Obamacare. But as you note, it's very popular with a lot of people. A lot of people are signing up on these exchanges, and the longer it is around, the harder it is to take that entitlement away from people, which is something Ted Cruz, to his credit, warned of last year when they were in the kind of frenzy of trying to keep this from happening.
But, Jason, when you see people like David Tedrow, who we had on the show last night, that are being helped by this, I mean, people over politics will always outrun the clock.
Well, definitely. And I think what's key about David, about his story, is that he is someone who did get dropped from his doctor and ended up with a better deal. And I think that's the other part of this story that's not being discussed. Does the Affordable Care Act work for everybody? No, it doesn't work for everybody. But the vast majority of the people who are participating, they are getting a benefit from it. Taking that benefit away is not going to help business. Walmart is behind the Affordable Care Act because big business doesn't want to subsidize their employees anymore. There's so many different levels that this policy is working at, and the Republicans just don't care. They just want to score points.
Jason Johnson and Michelle Cottle, thank you both for your time tonight.
Thanks,
Thank you, Rev.